Imam at Newburgh agrees that the Muslim community is still being watched and infiltrated. But next time, he says, they're not going to be quiet if an informant comes in.
This time, that if we do suspect someone, we're telling. We're not going to allow some individuals to get caught in a web again, because we believe that had we said something this time, that those 4 men would still be in the backyard somewhere. They would just be right out there, frustrated, broke, just feeling miserable and just talking. At least that person, the agent provocateur, would have had to go somewhere else, because they would have probably told him that his cover was blown.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it?
Now! In other places, too, people are also speaking up against what they see as a wider pattern of entrapment and preemptive prosecution of Muslims. This is Albany Common Council member Dominic Calsolaro.
It just doesn't seem right. I mean, I just don't understand how our government, can take these actions.
In April of this year, the Albany Common Council passed a resolution calling on the Justice Department to re-examine past terrorism cases to assess whether the classified evidence used by the government also contained material that might have exonerated the men if they'd been allowed to see and use this evidence. They based the resolution on a July 2009 report by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice.
The Inspector General's report was really key, because when you come in and the government, does a study and they themselves says you should look at these cases again, and, it should be done. It seems like, they did these actions because they had to show that they were being, the federal government was trying to be tough on terrorism. But the fact that if you have to send in, an agent provocateur, whatever you want to call them, in order to entrap someone who's not doing anything illegal to begin with, I mean, where's this going? And then where does it stop?
The families of the men are left questioning whether it's possible for Muslims to receive a fair trial in post-9/11 America.
I didn't find out what kind of terrorists we are, what we did, which part, the part that required the terrorists. Still, I don't know. They broke our trust. And I saw when I get married, my husband, he carried American flag all the way from here as a proud citizen of this country. And when he go back home, he said, I am American.
Even after 26 years of living in this country, Fatima Hussein believes she and her family will never be seen as Americans.
Living that long, this society, still we are not part of here, I don't know. After September 11, changed everything from everywhere.
Farrick Duca, the father of the 3 Duca brothers, says his faith in the American justice system has been shattered.
I'm surprised in the justice of this country. I came here because I believed in American justice, in American freedom, in American democracy. I'm upset and disturbed. How could this happen to America? Muslims, they don't raise in their voices because they are scared. Everybody thinks, who's going to be next? Because they can see they're convicting people with no facts. They are good fabricators. They are professionals of making up things. I lost 3 sons, and I'm losing everything else. They destroyed me. It's not justice no more here for Muslims.
NYU's Karen Greenberg warns that increasing the perception that Muslims are being unfairly or preemptively prosecuted is both wrong and counterproductive to national security.
To target Muslims in what we call a democracy is not a place we want to be going. What we need is a kind of leadership that is brave enough to distinguish the issues, just like we distinguish criminals from non-criminals in other environments.
Former FBI agent James Weddick believes that the only way things can change is if the Justice Department rethinks the role of informants in terrorism investigations.
If the Obama administration is interested in giving desperate people a fair shake, he's got to make the Justice Department look at this issue involving informants and do something.
3, 4, 6, 5!
Meanwhile, families of the accused and convicted men are not waiting for the Justice Department to act. They're continuing to mobilize and fight for justice, despite the pain of losing their loved ones to prison.
I decided to start speaking out to everyone because I saw many people wouldn't want to do that because they were scared. So I decided to defend them and my family from the name terrorists, which we're not.
This wasn't no cell. This wasn't no, oh my God, they wanted to. This was bold. This was a plot and a skit directed by the FBI. You know, we was the extras and we didn't get paid. Thank you very much. You know, but you're going to use a family, you think nobody wasn't going to speak up? Now one person speaking up, people telling me what my government can do to me, then bring it. Do what you want to do. But we coming together for justice. We're fighting for justice.
For Democracy Now!, this is Anjali, Kamat, and Jacquie Soohen. Special thanks to Hani Massoud, Petra Bartosiewicz, John Hamilton, Nicole Salazar, Aisha Huda, and Project Salam.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want?
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, Democracy Now!'s Anjali Kamat will join us. Stay with us. Storm by Godspeed, You Black Emperor. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Well, for more, I'm joined now in studio by Democracy Now!'s Anjali Kamat with that superb investigation she did with Jacquie Soohen. We're also joined by independent journalist Petra Bartosiewicz. She's the forthcoming author of a book on terror in the United States since 9/11. It's called The Best Terrorists We Could Find. Welcome you both to Democracy Now! First, Anjali, you have spent months in Muslim communities in the New York area. Congratulations on this very important documentary that brings out the voices of people at the grassroots. What most surprised you in this investigation that you did on these three cases?
Well, thanks, Amy. I think one of the things is, you know, today we've all seen in the newspapers, Faisal Shahzad was just sentenced to life in prison, the Times Square bomber, the foil Times Square bomber. We keep hearing of threats of terrorism, homegrown terror. Last month, the co-chairman of the 9/11 Commission released a report singling out domestic terrorism as the largest threat and something that we're not prepared for in this country. And one of the things that I was interested in was seeing news reports when the Newburgh case started that the informant who was used in the case had been used in a previous case. And I was like, here's an FBI informant, an undercover informant with a criminal past coming in, and you see these communities are poor communities, vulnerable communities, one of the most impoverished areas in the country, Newburgh, New York. And these are 4 young African-American men who were caught up in this case. How much can you call them, to what degree can you call these men terrorists? Did they commit a crime? Yes. Were they terrorists? Are these terrorist crimes? And that's the question I wanted to investigate and set out. And one of the things I found is that you have over 1,000 prosecutions since 9/11, terror-related prosecutions. Many of these cases are based on the testimony of paid government informants. Only a few of these cases are more serious, like the Faisal Shahzad case. And Petra was in the courtroom yesterday when he was sentenced.
Petra, we often find that one case paints or taints another case. Talk about this case. Now, here's a case where a man pled guilty. He said he was doing this.
Yeah, I think you'll see in the coverage, even though these two cases, the Newburgh case and the Faisal Shahzad case, unfolded literally on the same floor of a courthouse, they in adjoining courtrooms. In Faisal Shahzad's case, this is somebody who actually attempted to do something. That's very rare. Almost very, very few cases have unfolded like that. And he pled guilty to that. And I think it's interesting to look at this case as almost something that was resolved not because of some new initiatives that have been instituted since 9/11 in terms of security measures, but despite that, because in fact he was thwarted only by his own incompetence when the bomb failed to detonate. Meanwhile,
you were in the courtroom yesterday when the sentencing happened.
That's right. And he was without remorse. The proceeding took place very quickly. He was sentenced to life in prison. And as far as it appears, there may be an appeal, but he wasn't interested in appealing.
Well, he's pled guilty. What does he say?
He sort of said this is the first salvo in a long, war of that America is going to, go down. And he wasn't particularly eloquent or original. I think he made his point at his arraignment a while back. And I think the judge said, pretty accurately, you're 30 years old, you're going to have a long time to think about this. It was a stupid thing to do.
Meanwhile, right across the hallway, Petra.
Right across the hallway, a case that's going to be considered just another homegrown terrorism case, but so different. 4 defendants who had no prior criminal records, no evidence of prior terrorism involvement, no involvement with any groups. They didn't attend any training camps. They were 4 poor guys from Newburgh, New York, and they were approached by an informant who worked on them for, at least the lead defendant, for 4 months before the tapes started rolling. And the other 3 defendants were brought in the very last month. And, as Anjali says correctly, they are guilty perhaps of criminal acts, but what is missing is that crucial political motivation that would bring this to the level of a crime of terrorism.
And what does terrorism mean when you lay terrorism on that? Is it like hate crime in the sense it'll just mean enhanced sentencing?
I think it does a number of things. Number one, their sentences will be far longer. I think in the Fort Dix case, they got 30 years plus life, as we saw in the documentary. So they're going to go to prison for much longer, but it also adds to the Justice Department's sort of statistical scorecard in the war on terrorism. These cases serve an incredibly important purpose in that they kind of justify this terrorism machinery that has come in almost the last decade. It involves a lot of money, a lot of new investigative procedures, a lot of infringement of civil liberties. And without these cases, we really don't have much to show. So they are important in that respect alone.
Anjali.
And if these are the cases, if this is what we have to show, what we need to remember, I mean, who are the 4 defendants in the Newburgh case? It's quite striking. One of them is a paranoid schizophrenic. An immigration judge earlier refused to deport him because of mental instability. He lived in a 1-room occupancy in Newburgh's crack alley. When he was arrested, there were open containers of urine in his room because he was too afraid to walk down the hall to use the restroom. This man we're supposed to believe, is a terrorist. Charge him with a crime, charge him with stupidity. One of the family members said this. Charge these people with stupidity, with getting involved with stupid, informants and agreeing to do things. But what actually happened? Nothing happened. No bombs went off. No missiles were fired. The bombs were fake. The missiles were fake. They were supplied by the government. They were led into this by a government informant. This is what the defense has been arguing.
And people would then say, but if they weren't fake?
And then if they weren't fake, I mean, this is what the government comes in and says, right? Their argument is these 4 men agreed to drive the bombs up to the synagogue. They planted them there. They did not know they were fake. They assumed they were real. Now, the question is, would they, and this is what the defense has been trying to argue, the sort of entrapment defense, is were they predisposed to commit this crime? Would they have committed this crime? Would they have plotted to do this if the government informant hadn't put this idea into their head? And there's actually evidence that came out during the trial that shows that the handler, the FBI handler in the case, Robert Fuller, sent a memo in January 2009 to his colleagues pointing out that he had told the guards at Stewart Air Base, which is one of the places where the attack was supposed to take place, telling them that if the lead defendant, James Cromedy, came there on his own, he was not a threat. He was only dangerous if he comes with the informant. I wasn't able to get a copy of this document because it wasn't entered into evidence, apparently, but it was something that was mentioned in the first weeks of the trial.
Now, it's interesting, Anjali, the FBI, you called them repeatedly, over and over, and they would not grant an
No.
interview. Yet you did have an interview with this